And I am delighted to give the floor to Petri Salminen, President of SME United, to kick off proceedings today. Petri, over to you.
Thank you very much, and dear representatives of the European institutions and dear stakeholders and experts, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this highly important and very timely conference. Unfortunately, I greet you from a computer screen, although I would have loved to meet you in person, but anyone who has their own little kids or children might recognize the situation when your child catches a flu or something. It's only a fraction of a second when an entire family catches it as well. But indeed, the COVID restrictions made our life more challenging, and sometimes these become unbearable, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises that I represent. Myself, I was elected as a president of SME United last December. After the election, I promised to focus on the recovery of SMEs and crafts following the pandemic crisis and allow them to tackle the digital and green transformation. These are the main challenges 22 million European SMEs are facing at the moment. It is certainly not an easy task. Many small and medium-sized enterprises struggle to survive. I think all of us saw that some shops and commercial premises closed down, those restaurants, cafes, and gyms that we previously regularly used. And there are plenty of such examples. Although we have witnessed that the crisis did not treat all companies or sectors in an equal manner, we can draw up some commonalities. In my home country, Finland, the crisis has hit the micro companies from 1 to 10 people the hardest. And I believe that this same observation applies also to many other European countries as well. Our latest survey shows that about 50% of SMEs report a decrease in turnover due to a lack of demand, lack of workforce or sick staff, or due to shortage of material, and currently also the effects of rising inflation as well. However, the COVID crisis has also renewed our SME sector that has taken active action to respond to challenges by permanently changing the way to do business. SMEs have moved very actively towards digital and green transformation. They produce eco-friendly food, clothes, toys, and many other products, install charging stations for electric cars, plant trees, create mobile apps, set up web shops, etc. In order to facilitate this, EU policy has to provide the right framework for green transition and guarantee a level playing field for all enterprises. For instance, to encourage small and medium-sized enterprises to become more ecologically sound, we need more supportive framework at the EU and the national level. We have to guarantee access to finance for the high upfront investments, technical assistance to understand what to change and how, support for eco-innovation without forgetting the upskilling and reskilling of the workforce to new green competencies. We also need public authorities to stimulate and strengthen new manufacturing and distribution business models at a local level where SMEs operate. I refer particularly to urban industrial symbiosis and short supply chains, which would implement a circular economy by reusing and recycling raw materials and minimizing waste, as well as road transport emissions. Moreover, SMEs ask for a stable regulatory framework to have clarity on investment timeframes. In parallel, SMEs move into the digital age. Many of them are already frontrunners. However, the majority of SMEs struggle with this transition. They do not have the means to finance investment requirements and to access the needed technologies. Furthermore, entrepreneurs and their staff might lack digital qualifications and have difficulties finding them in the labor market. This holds back the transition in both dimensions, the digital and the green one. Too many SMEs complain about deficits in digital and mobility infrastructure, which is especially a problem in rural areas. In digitalization, a level playing field and fair competition have to be ensured between big and small players. Especially fair contractual conditions between SMEs and major platforms are necessary. Small companies should also have access to data, which has become a precondition to compete in this digital economy. For SMEs, access to data determines whether they can continue their activity and develop new products, services, and business models. SMEs count on the necessary technical assistance to integrate these new technologies into their business. Public authorities have an important role to play in creating facilitating environment. They have to ensure a performant digital infrastructure, e.g. broadband, rollout of 5G, cloud computing solutions, and a high level of cybersecurity. These services must be accessible under affordable and fair contractual conditions for small and medium-sized enterprises. SME-friendly standards have to allow SME participation and should ensure interoperability. Furthermore, the digitalization of public services with performant and accessible e-government are keys to accelerating the EU's digital transformation. Against this background, as SME United, we feel the new industrial strategy is a very important instrument for Europe to master the recovery from the COVID crisis, to tackle the transition to more digital and greener economy, and to make our economy more competitive and more resilient. We fully support the new approach which targets specific sectors and also addresses whole ecosystems. I'm also fully convinced, and we have some positive experience already at the national level in my country, Finland, that the creation of transition pathways for the different ecosystems is the right approach. We need clarity about the future regulatory framework in the ecosystems. We all together have to make sure that the appropriate infrastructure is developed. Necessary support structures are available in close cooperation with SME organizations, and that the investments in required skills starts now. In this context, I welcome the efforts made so far by the European Commission to involve all relevant stakeholders in the design of these transition pathways. You know that due to the limited resources of SMEs and their organizations, it is challenging for SMEs to get fully involved. However, I want to assure you that we as SME United, we do our best to contribute to this joint effort. At the same time, we are very pleased that the European Commission is fully aware of the importance of SMEs for all ecosystems and the strong focus given to SMEs in the blueprint for the transition pathways presented during these industry days. We are all fully aware that there are different challenges for the different ecosystems and their transition to a digital, green, competitive and resilient economy. Even so, I would like to point out to some overarching topics which are important for SMEs in all sectors. Firstly, SMEs demand better regulation and a regulatory framework. As entrepreneurs, we expect from governments that they ensure an enabling legal framework and a facilitating environment, which are prerequisites for SMEs to succeed. Enabling legal framework, that means that legal initiatives are based on the think small first principle, that laws are drafted with the compliance capacity of smallest ones in mind, and that, if necessary, additional layers are added for those with more complex business models. Still, red tape and unworkable and burdensome legislation remains one of the main concerns for entrepreneurs. Not because they are against legislation, but because the legislation is not adapted to their capacity. After decades, the think small first principle remains a hollow phrase, and policymakers still not act upon it as a priority. The severe impact on SMEs is still not properly assessed. For example, in the case of the trickle-down effects, despite the solemn declaration at the beginning of this Commission's mandate, the one-in, one-out rule goes unheeded. Furthermore, Europe has to guarantee the four freedoms and a level playing field for all actors and fair rules for international trade. This requires effective and uniform implementation and enforcement of all jointly agreed rules. Secondly, SMEs require access to finance for investments and innovation. Already before the crisis, SMEs had difficulties accessing needed finance, and the situation got worse during the crisis. We left many of our companies with even higher debt levels. At the same time, SMEs have to invest and innovate to recover from the crisis, and certainly to master the twin transition. Therefore, we really would like to see progress being made with the Capital Market Union. The EU should use the current review of the regulatory framework for banks and insurance companies to facilitate their financing of companies. Another concern of many SMEs are the burdensome reporting requirements linked to sustainable finance. Here we have to find solutions that are feasible in order to allow SMEs access to future finance. In addition, we ask the European institutions to make the new programs like Invest EU, the European Guarantee Fund, and the support via the Recovery and Resilience Facility operational as fast as possible. Thirdly, SMEs depend on qualifications and skills. With the digital and green transition, the acceleration of change also due to the COVID pandemics, skills needs are rapidly evolving. The solutions are manifold. We first have to better identify what skills are requested by enterprises through the setup of well-performing skills intelligence systems to anticipate the new required skills and future skills needs.
Petri,
Secondly,
to be brief now, please. We're running out
it
of
is
time.
urgent to strongly invest in continuous training for employed people, for the unemployed, for the inactive to come back into the labor market, including entrepreneurs. Thirdly, we should foster apprenticeships that successfully combine theory, a training center, and practice in an enterprise as a learning place. Apprenticeships should be available at all levels of educations.
Petri, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up very briefly now, please.
That all of us have to be clear that Europe's economy will only succeed in its transition to more digital and greener economy if SMEs are on board. We have to be aware that such transition only works if Europe companies stay competitive in the global market. And I firmly believe that this is a task that we can achieve by doing cooperation and doing things right together. Let's work on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petri, and outlining there not only the impact of COVID and the struggle that this has left many SMEs facing, but some of those transitions. You said it wasn't easy, but you outlined some of the things that you think need to be done in order to address it, that getting the policy framework right and using the industrial strategy. Lots to discuss, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a lot of sessions focusing on these issues in more detail throughout the day. But Petri Salminen, thank you so much for getting us off to such a great start this morning. We're going to move now to our first 3 parallel sessions on aerospace and defence ecosystems, on fostering breakthrough technologies in cultural and creative industry ecosystem, and Meet the Experts, a session on financing the green and digital transition.